Hi, I'm Dr. Steve Giudice. Thanks for tuning in today. Today we're going to have a conversation about mindfulness, a great interest of mine, as well as a longtime friend and colleague at Live Well, Work Well, who's joining me today.
Hi, I'm Edyta Domian. I'm the director of Live Well, Work Well, and it's a pleasure to be here. So Steve, why don't we maybe start with a very short meditation, and then I do have some questions that always come up when I meditate or take some time just to be mindful.
It's a great idea, because one thing about mindfulness or meditation, some people use them synonymously, is it's an experiential thing. So describing it, discussing it, which we're going to do today, never takes the place for actually experiencing it. So why don't we just start, and for people watching this wherever they are, unless you're driving a car, it may not be a good idea to do this right now. But for all others, I want you just to basically sit or lie down or just be standing. And often we do it with our eyes closed. So I'm going to ask everyone just to close their eyes, sit in a comfortable position, and really just to be aware of the bodily sensations that you're experiencing. Your feet on the floor, arms perhaps on your lap or touching the chair. Just be aware of the actual physical sensations that are occurring in this moment. And as there's a silence there, your mind may have wandered off to a different thought, and that's okay. When that happens, recognize that you've kind of drifted off with a different thought, and just bring it back to the attention of what you're actually feeling. The feelings themselves are not as important as the fact that you're experiencing them in the moment. People often use their breath. We breathe from the time we're born until the time we die, constantly. It's always with us. Can always use it as an anchor during mindfulness or any kind of meditative experience. Feel the breath come in, breath goes out. Nothing special, just sensations, being aware of them, feeling them. And as the mind drifts off, as it may tend to do, recognize that and just bring your attention gently back to your body, breathing, sitting. Breath in and breath out. Very simple. And why don't we open our eyes and come back together in the conversation?
Wow, thank you. That was really great.
Well, good. And hopefully people are still tuned in, because one of the big problems with people when they start mindfulness practice or meditation is they find it to be boring, and their mind doesn't want to sit there doing nothing. And for people watching, they don't want to see somebody sitting there breathing and telling them to breathe or feel. But if they can stay with it, there's a lot of power and a lot of transformational things that can occur. And that's why mindfulness has become so popular these days, and we're finding out there's a lot of good science to back up how it can help people. And so therefore, trying to do it daily is helpful. And we just had a little experiment with that for a couple of minutes to get a taste of it.
Right. So I do have a few questions.
Sure.
Sometimes when I meditate, I find my thoughts wandering, as you said, but also I become a little fidgety.
Yep.
Do you have any recommendation for what to do with this, with being fidgety?
Sure. And that's a common thing that people feel. It's hard to just sit still. We're not used to that. If you think about it, aside from when we're sleeping, and even then people can be fairly fitful when they sleep, we're not really sitting and in a way that's really without motion for very often. So this can sometimes cause people to feel fidgety and restless. A couple of things I'll say about that. One is make sure you're getting into a comfortable position. It helps to be fairly comfortable, but not so comfortable that you fall asleep. It helps to keep the body symmetrical, so you can feel in kind of a dignified posture with the body symmetrical. You can breathe more easily that way, and that can help as well. And then when you feel fidgety, the first thing to do is, rather than responding to that, is just take notice of that and just say, gee, I'm feeling fidgety. What's that about? Or do I have to react to that? And if you're feeling fidgety enough, you may want to reposition yourself. Sometimes when people do this at the beginning, they feel like they can't move and something else has to, they have to do something in a particular way. It's really more about self-discovery. So if you really find like, gee, whenever I'm sitting on the floor or this chair, or I'm doing it in my car, I feel fidgety, that may not be the best place. But often the fidgetiness really, I find, is just the mind rebelling against being told to hold still. The mind doesn't tend to like the mindfulness, ironically enough, which if we use the word right in the term, but the mind doesn't like it because the mind naturally rejects being still. It's like a small child being told to stay still.
Right.
They want to move. They want to get into different things, and that's what our minds are programmed to do, and we love them for it because that can be very helpful. But if it's overactive, just like the child playing, it's overactive and pulling things apart, it can be disruptive to us. So I think with the fidgetiness, experiment with body position, experiment with where you're doing it, but most of all, when you're feeling that, just notice that that's what you're feeling, and then try to let that go and feel another sensation that may be happening at the same time.
Thank you. So I'm sure you get this question quite a lot. As a busy mom and professional, I frequently find lack of time to meditate and to make it meaningful. So maybe a twofold question is, how do I create time, but also is there an optimal amount of time that I should be meditating for?
I think when I've taught mindfulness for many years now, the number one obstacle for people to doing a formal practice is they don't feel they have the time to do it.
Right.
That's a great early on question for this. There's no way to create time for this as much as making a decision that this is important, that I want to carve out time in my life. I always tell people very bluntly that if you're going to do a practice of mindfulness, it means you're going to do less of something else you're already doing. And there's just no way of getting around that. A finite number of time in the day, and if you're going to take out time to do something new, some other thing you're doing has to be taken out. So that's something that we have to just recognize, and it is difficult. And we're busy, and we have busy lives. But I think it's not so much that we're busy, which we all are. I think a lot of times is we feel as though we're doing nothing. And I often have people start with 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. And if you think about it, it's hard to say, I don't have 5 minutes during the day. So it's oftentimes I have the 5 minutes, I just find out, why would I waste it doing nothing? So let's get at the problem differently. When I start off encouraging people to start with 5 or 10 minutes, then I think that takes away the obstacle of time. I mean, obviously 5 or 10 minutes is time. It's a fairly brief time. And now it comes to a different obstacle of, I don't feel I'm getting anything out of this. I don't want to waste time just sitting there. So I think that finding time is hard. Experiment with the times of the day, and also be very honest with yourself and say, gee, if I have to eliminate something from my life, then what is it that I'm going to eliminate? Am I going to get up a little earlier, go to bed a little bit later? Am I going to not read certain things? Am I going to not check my phone before I go to bed? They're all things we can eliminate. We have to choose that. So I think that helps. Your other question about what is the amount of time that's important that we'll get a benefit from, I don't think anybody knows that. There was an article I read recently about what's the proper dose of mindfulness, if you want to think of it as a dose. And the dose really is how much time today do you need to do. I don't think anyone knows that. There are certain mindfulness apps that talk about doing 10 minutes a day. Back when transcendental meditation was popular, and it still is, but back when it came out in the 1970s, their program was doing 20 minutes in the morning and then 20 minutes in the evening. There are mindfulness practitioners who do an hour in the morning. I think it varies. But to me, I think that something is better than nothing. And the analogy I make is with exercise or anything else that's healthy for us. If someone says, gee, I can only do 5 minutes of the Stairmaster or the exercise machine a day, I don't think that's worthwhile. I'd say then do the 5 minutes. 5 may grow to 10. At least your body's moving for that 5 minutes. And I think the same thing with a diet. Someone says, gee, I can't adhere to this diet all day long. How much time can you adhere to it? So you'll get some benefit from that. But I think the time obstacle, again, as you mentioned, is a big one. And just to summarize, I'd say start small if you feel you're too busy, and try to be regular with the practice. And then number 2 is, don't worry about, am I getting enough? Just let go of the goals, feel the relaxation, and you may find you can find more time and deepen the practice from there.
So, one more question. Is there a time of day that is better to meditate, morning or midday, or maybe evening?
Yeah.
Is there a preference?
Again, I would say discover for yourself what works best for you. People who do this regularly usually and traditionally do it early in the morning before the day kind of starts. So they'll get up, maybe go to the bathroom, they'll freshen up, maybe take a shower, maybe not, but then they'll kind of do it before the day begins. That's been considered a very traditional or conventional time to do it, but if that doesn't fit a person's schedule, there's nothing special or magical about that time. I think everyone's different. Doing it late at night, I think, is another common time because the day's kind of ending. The problem with that is you may be tired and you may tend to fall asleep. And doing it during the day is also another option. But then once the day begins, oftentimes other things divert our attention, and it's hard to find that time. But I've even suggested to people who have young children and they have busy lives, they're going to work, and they'll tell me, I just don't have 5 minutes. You don't understand, you know, that alarm goes off, the kids are getting up, I got to make that breakfast, get those lunches. It's just, there's no way I'm even gonna have 5 minutes when those kids are moving around. And for that individual, I'd say, gee, can you get into work 5 minutes early? And what if your boss or manager said, can you come into work 5 minutes early for the next week? You probably would say, yeah, I guess so. How about coming in 5 minutes early and just sitting in your car, doing your mindfulness for the 5 minutes when the engine's off, and then going to work. And again, it's a nice little intercalation, if you will, of fitting that in there. The kids are on the school bus, work hasn't quite started, but it's about to. So being creative, I think, is important. And the idea is to do it in any way you can, rather than any kind of special time or place.
Oh, thank you. That's a great suggestion. And I will say one of my favorite practices is meditating at night, but as you said, I fall asleep. So I have my favorite nighttime meditations, and they do definitely put me to sleep. So speaking of sleep, I sometimes tend to doze off when I meditate, even during the day. Could you talk a little bit more about staying awake while we meditate?
Right. So the first thing is that if you do fall asleep, you're not doing the mindfulness practice, obviously, because you're asleep. And mindfulness practice is really looking at your consciousness. We talked earlier in one of the in the introduction about how you're watching your consciousness go from being the default mode, which is basically daydreaming, to task positive mode, which is basically feeling your body, being present in the moment. And if you're asleep, you don't have availability of those two sets of consciousness. And the interplay of those two is what mindfulness is really about. So if you find yourself falling asleep, a couple of suggestions. Number one, look and see what time of the day it is. Is it right before bed when you already naturally want to fall asleep? Think about your position. Are you too comfortable? Are you in a lazy boy chair sitting back and feeling, wow, this is really great? Some people do the mindfulness practice lying down. And then again, if you're prone to falling asleep, that would not be a good suggestion. So looking at position, I think that's important. And aside from that, I think there's always a different way to combat that. So let's say you talked about how you like to have a mindfulness practice before you go to bed, but the problem is you fall asleep so quickly. So one could do a mindfulness practice for 5 minutes of standing next to the bed. And you're standing straight, you get your eyes closed, and just feeling your breath for 5 minutes, standing. You won't fall asleep at that point. And then just that'll create a sense of relaxation. And then if you want to use that same practice in your bed to help you drift into sleep, that's different. At least you've had that 5 minutes of mindfulness as you're standing before that bed. So being creative, I think, is really important to any of this kind of work. And there are no rules, it's not so rigid. So I think finding out posture, positioning, and when and where you're doing it.
Great, that's a great suggestion. And so how would one know when they're an expert at meditating? Or is there such a thing as being an expert? Yeah, well, there's an old saying from years ago that applies to something about that, is those who know don't tell, and those who tell don't know. So I think that even people who do this for a long time would not claim to be an expert. The idea really is an experiential thing, and that people who have been practicing for years, they're still having that push-pull going on to this day about drifting off, coming back. Now with more experience, they may find that they're not drifting off into rumination and daydreams as much as when they first started,
but the mind still does that dynamic. And that observation, really, of yourself is what mindfulness is. And there's no way ever to be a, quote, expert and when you're done, because it's a constant flowing of observing your thoughts, observing what you're doing, and one can somehow get a little bit more comfortable with that with practice, but expertise is probably not the term that would come to mind even for people who have practiced for a long time.
Well, that's good to know, because sometimes I think we feel guilty that our thoughts take over, or we're fidgety, and even after having done meditation for a few years, sometimes I find myself just not focusing as I would like to focus.
Right.
So thank you.
I think that's a misconception too, that you have to be an expert or you have to be a certain type of mind. It can be for anybody. There's also there's a famous saying in the meditation world that for an expert, basically, there are limited possibilities, but for the beginner, there are infinite possibilities. So the idea really is that coming to it as a beginner, and if you think about it, even somebody who's been meditating and doing mindfulness for decades, when they sit down in the morning or in the evening, whatever, it's a new day, new thoughts are arising, and that interplay that we're talking about is still happening. And they're still in that beginner's mind, watching themselves do that. Remember too that our mind tends to want to put ourselves down, have a lot of doubt. When you do the mindfulness, you see how many thoughts are very much self-recrimination, doubtful, I'm a bad person. A lot of them tend to be negative on ourselves. And the last thing we want to do is you're teaching someone to do mindfulness is if they have a thought, I'm not doing this right, somebody else is better than this, I'll never be able to be like somebody else. If anything, recognize that as a thought to just let go of, feel your body, and get comfortable with that process.
Great. Well, maybe one last question, and for those who are beginners like me and are just starting, where would I start? What is the best place? Are there different websites or teachers that you would recommend for our audience and myself as well?
I think there are a lot of different resources. I think that up until recently, most of the resources where people go to mindfulness centers or meditation centers and have a relationship with a teacher. There were books, there were CDs or tapes that had guided meditations and mindfulness meditations on them you can do at home. So I think what's happened in the last 10 to 15 years, of course, is with apps, and there are a large number and quite a proliferation of mindfulness apps available. And many of them I think are good. They can be very helpful, and it's interesting how some of the apps started. Some of the apps started by mindfulness teachers kind of resisting the use of apps, but by somebody saying, gee, I couldn't attend your retreat or your seminar. Is there any way I can get a recording of it? And they recorded it. And then someone said, gee, I gave that to a friend and they're just using that. So I think we're finding out that there is a benefit to the apps.
That's great.
And I think today with the technology and people having phones, they're so prevalent, that's probably the easiest way I would introduce somebody to mindfulness if they can't find a teacher, if they can't find a course, or if they can't go to a retreat, which I think they have their benefits as well, of course, because you're right there learning in the traditional way. But again, as I said before, there are no rules. Something is better than nothing. And if you're going to do an app, I would just say explore them. Many of them either are free or they have a free 10-day or 2-week trial period, because I think trying them is very important to see the right fit for you. That can help as well.
And I think we're fortunate that there are so many resources out there that we can just try and see what works for me versus someone else. So
it's interesting too, because some of them have the 10-day free trial, and you say, well, why 10 days? Perhaps they've done focus groups and they found out that after 10 days, the practice starts to get a little more, you're used to it and see some of the benefits. And you had asked earlier, I think, about some of the benefits and how soon do you find them out. I think as much as you can, try to let go of looking at immediate benefits, because again, that's just another way the mind's trying to evaluate, hey, this is boring, you're getting nothing out of this, don't waste your time. Definitely don't waste your money on the app, even after 10 days. This is what the mind tends to do, of course, and then not just my mind, this is very natural. So I think what I would tell people is that you can read articles about the benefits of mindfulness. There are many of them are published, they're scientifically based. It can help things with stress, depression, anxiety, can help with sleep disorders. It can even, has been shown to help boost our immune system and things like this. So there's plenty of benefits there. But let's put those aside sometimes and just say, okay, I'm interested, how do I get started? One of the things I tell people right off the bat is that one thing that mindfulness will do is it will evoke something called the relaxation response. The relaxation response is something you can feel immediate in the moment while you're doing the practice. As you do this longer, some people have reported other benefits, a sense of calm, less reactive. And you can see why, because if you're really looking at your thoughts without clinging to them or responding to them, and you're really practice doing that, then when you're in the heat of the moment, so to speak, if you're at work, you're having an argument with a family member, and you feel the urge to say something you may regret later, then it gives you that little space, oh, that's just a thought to react to, let me wait and see. So it gives you a little bit of play, if you will, between when you're stimulated and when you're reacting. And if you think about it, that's what you're doing in the practice. So you have a thought, gee, I'm dreading work this afternoon because my boss has that meeting. Then all of a sudden, let that thought go, feel your body. So we're used to having thoughts come up, letting them go. And then when you're under a stressful situation, so you get an email from someone saying, I was upset with what you did yesterday, can we talk about this? That's going to create some anxiety. Let that go, we haven't talked yet. They may come in there and think, oh, gee, I sent that to the wrong person, you're doing great work. How do we know that? So the point is that rather than reacting and assuming the worst, we can actually just let the thought go, concentrate on what we're doing now, and you can see how that might create a little bit more sense of calm or confidence because you're practicing that.
Right.
Many people will say that when they're waiting, they're just more patient because of the practice. They'll take things in stride more. They're not going to be more reactive. And they can see that the thoughts that they have, whether they're condemning themselves or condemning somebody else, they don't have to be grabbed and run with. You can actually just let them go. They just are a thought, and they will pass eventually. But I try to encourage people not to get too caught up in the benefits, because that kind of keeps their eye on the prize, if you will, and just say, you're going to relax, get the relaxation response. If it gives you a different outlook that gives you some kind of equanimity, tranquility, less reactive, that's great too. Your friends and family may notice it before you do and say, gee, I thought you'd be really angry. And you say, well, I am angry, I'm just not expressing it right now. I thought that'd be a bad time to do that. Well, they think, wow. And it doesn't make you robotic. People often have the misconception it makes you robotic, it makes you so tranquil that you kind of just lose your edge and kind of just become this person who accepts everything and doesn't really get in there and fight. I think quite the contrary. I think it really helps people focus on what's important and not get caught up in their own reactions. And that's why they'll teach mindfulness to pro athletes. They'll teach it to CEOs. And clearly they're not teaching it there for them to lose their edge. They're teaching it so that they get thoughts that are not helpful to their task, they can more easily let them go. So I think that's important as well.
Yeah, and I like that concept of space, right? Between stimulus and reaction.
Yes. That
there is that space. And I think with mindfulness, the more one practices, the bigger that space becomes, or awareness of that space.
The awareness, I think the awareness of that space, which might give the sense of an elongation, but at least says that there's actually, you can put a wedge. You can put a wedge between thought, feeling, and action, so that when you read something that may make you angry or may make you fearful, or you get a call from your doctor and it's an answering machine message saying, hello, your doctor's office is calling, please call back if you get this before 5 o'clock. You look up in there, it's 5:15, and you get anxious and it's Friday, they open again at Monday. Well, it could be good news, it could be bad news, you don't know. But many people will perseverate and just assume the worst, and that whole weekend will get ruined by that constant thinking about the negative. Whereas mindfulness allows you to just let that go, and if that thought keeps coming back in, you just feel your body, and just stay with the present. So it gives you the awareness of that space, and you can utilize that wedge between when that thought comes and do you have to act on that thought.
Yeah. So this is just a little bit of a different question, but how does mindfulness compare to religion?
Right. I think that's I think the one meditation teacher talks about how mindfulness has had probably the worst public relations campaign in the history of any techniques, if you will. And the reason is because mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness, did originate in India as part of the Buddhist and Hindu tradition.
Yeah.
And because that was the first introduction into Western intellectual circles, then that's where it got to be conflated, if you will, with religion. But it really has nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with beliefs. It really is more of a scientifically proved psychological technique, if you will, to help relax, to help get different perspective, and to help really run your life in a way that's more responsive than reactive. But the origins of it do have that, and that's where it was kind of mingled a little bit. I think the last 10, 15, 20 years, largely through the work of Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, I think that's been kind of taken away. When I was first trying to teach people mindfulness, they would have misconceptions, say, well, I don't want to believe or leave my religion. No one has to believe anything. No one has to have any faith in anything. This is purely a clinical, medical application. It's basically something we do for our minds to stay healthy. And I make the analogy where if there was a certain religious practice that found a very healthy diet, and we discovered it to keep our bodies healthy, we can certainly eat that diet and get the benefits, and whatever they want to believe, they can go on and believe.
Right, that's great.
Yeah.
So having said that, what would you recommend for organizations, and Dartmouth Hitchcock is a large organization, what would you suggest or that we could do to begin practice of mindfulness and introduce it to the workforce?
Right. I think, again, just like the individual biggest obstacle is time, I think with the organization, the obstacle is going to be time as well. Ideally, and some organizations have done this, where they'll allow people to use work time to do their mindfulness practice. I don't think we're there anytime soon, but I think obviously offering programs like this, promoting it, educating people about it, I think that's going to be helpful. Do you remember, before like the 1970s, if somebody would put on gym shorts and a t-shirt and go out for a run after work, they'd be considered to be quite, which that's fairly unnatural. Well, now we have organizations that have lockers and showers, and do you want to run during your lunch hour? And I think that we're going to see mindfulness take on that type of health perspective. So I think slow and steady, basically I think introducing as we're doing, talking about it, letting people sample it. But I think organizations, what they can do is certainly they can promote it through educational, they can promote it through giving people access to the information. They could have a room marked off for people if they wanted to do a group mindfulness class. And ideally they would actually respect it enough where they give them some time to practice and take care of themselves. So I think that we're going in the right direction. People are seeing mindfulness as the next stage in terms of well-being, more of a mental well-being, if you will. And I think that's why it's so popular in our culture today.
That's great. There are so many benefits to this practice, and I just want to really thank you for your time and for this educational question and answer session, because to me it was very helpful, and I hope that everyone also finds it helpful in their practice, whether you're a beginner or advanced practitioner.
Appreciate that, Edie, and good thoughtful questions, and I hope that people can learn some things, and most importantly I hope it gives them the incentive to go out and experience mindfulness, which is the only way to really learn about it anyway. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you.